I had intended to open the event tonight with my own remarks, but Donna Wilbur Fromm has a special request, and that is that our accordionist tonight play Len's favorite polka, Roll Out the Barrel, and everyone is instructed to sing along. So this is how we are going to begin. I'm Hannah Buxbaum, Interim Dean of the Law School, and I am honored to welcome you all here today. A few minutes from now, I may not be composed enough to address logistical matters, so let me do so now. Our program will close with a video tribute, and there will then be an opportunity afterwards for those of you who wish to speak. There are 2 microphones here at the front of the hall, one on each side, and we encourage you to use them. It is wonderful and overwhelming to see so many of you here. We're coming together as a community today to remember, to honor, and to celebrate Leonard Fromm. Without Len, we wouldn't even have this community to bring together, at least not in this form. More than any other individual, he built it and nurtured it and kept students and alumni connected with it. He gave us so much, truly, to honor and celebrate. Len joined the law school in 1979 as Director of Student Affairs. One of the earliest moves he made was to insist that he be referred to as the director for students. For students, indeed he was. Len was there for students as they stuck their toes into the sometimes cold bath of the 1L year. He was there to call their names as they walked across the stage at commencement. Along the way, he helped them face academic challenges, family emergencies, financial obstacles, relationship setbacks. He had an absolute genius for connecting each individual student with the particular resource that student needed at that moment, whether it was advice on curriculum, monetary support, a connection to a helpful alum, or even a job. We have heard so many stories over the past 6 months from alumni, and many of them started by saying, Dean Fromm kept me in law school. Even after students graduated, he kept them in our community. That moment at commencement when he boomed out the names of the graduating students did not mark the end of his relationship with them, just a shift as they became alums and began their professional lives. So many alumni came back to Len for advice on their careers and on their professional growth. He became Associate Dean for Students and Alumni Affairs, for Students and Alumni Affairs. He was for engagement, for community, for the compassion and affection and humanity that makes this school so special. It has been such an honor to read all the testimonials that have come into the office this year and to witness how one person improved the experience and lives of so many. And it has been such a challenge to think about what it is going to take in Len's absence to ensure that our community continues to offer to its students what he offered. To that end, we have created the Leonard Fromm Memorial Fund, which we will use to carry forward his mission, to provide students with whatever they need to be successful. And you will be hearing more about that in the future. I'm going to close with one brief story. Some of you have heard it before, but I still think about it a lot. When Len retired in May 2012, he planned to return to our school to teach in the legal profession class. One day after he had become ill, we were on the phone, and he told me about a dream he had had, a dream from which he had woken up really happy. In this dream, he was in his office up on the 3rd floor, the one we had said would be his, with his feet up on the desk, a posture I never saw him in downstairs, preparing for class and listening to the voices of his colleagues in the hallway outside. I hear Len's voice all the time, speaking with such love for Donna, such pride in Callan and Eric, such enthusiasm for Butler basketball, and such humility, but also deep optimism about what a law school can do for its students. What a privilege it is for us to be members of this community that Len helped build. Thank you.
Well, I remember dancing with Michael Keller, doing the polka, to that very polka, with Len playing it a couple years ago in back of the Alumni Center. I'm so grateful for this space to be with all of you and who just loved and admired Len Fromm so much, and to have this time together to really share our memories and our appreciation for his beautiful, beautiful life. You know, he was kind of our shepherd at the law school. He shepherded person after person in class after class through the valleys and the peaks of law school, and that just kept on happening after people graduated. I think that's why this room is so packed. I actually think that every good person who's connected with our law school is in this room today, in person or in spirit. You know, in May 2012, Len was on the cusp of what didn't sound very much like retirement. He was finishing out his 33rd year, and graduation was coming up, and he planned to head to Italy with Donna to teach, take a little time to retool, and then come back to the law school to teach. And you know Len, he was not going to let us do a single thing to celebrate any of that. He would never willingly let himself be the center of attention. I didn't tell him I was coming to the graduation party, because if I told him that I was coming to thank him in front of the students, he just wouldn't let me do it. So that night I got to say this to the students, but only because he didn't know I was coming. I said, wisdom is the knowledge of what is true and right, coupled with just judgment. Wisdom marries the grace of discernment to know what God wants of you with the gift of perception. Like Solomon, Dean Fromm has a wise and discerning heart. He inspires us by being fully present, by perceiving and nurturing our better angels, even when those angels are invisible to us. He perceives us all with both his mind and his heart. His integrity is such that I could not, in the wildest of my imaginings, imagine him knowingly doing a wrong or unkind thing, or at least one that does not involve an accordion. I told the students that night, I first met Dean Fromm when I was a student at this law school. Like many hundreds of other students, and without exaggeration, I owe him my professional life. In the 30 years since I first showed up on Dean Fromm's doorstep, he taught me countless lessons in selflessness, discernment, and what it means to live out a true vocation. And I told him, whatever bright star I followed to get to this place, I think its light must have emanated from that modest and welcoming office on the ground floor. When I was a student, there was only one person we thought of as the dean, and that was Dean Fromm. And I have no illusions that that changed at any point during the entire time he was there. I can't tell you how grateful I am that I had that opportunity. In the months since then, I know that many of you, maybe all of you, sent Len similar messages, and that they resonated with the same set of themes: honor, character, wisdom, discernment, integrity, and most of all, presence. Simone Weil wrote, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity." By this measure, Len Fromm was the most generous man on the planet. While he deflected attention from himself, he enveloped his students, colleagues, and friends in it, pure, undistracted, and whole. I have never known anyone with a greater ability to see the person standing in front of him more clearly. Len's focus was wholly there, and it was wholly human. Among his many gifts to our school, and perhaps the most valuable, was Len's ability, his unswerving ability, to discern the right thing for the student standing in front of him, and then to assure that the right thing happened. Sometimes that meant helping a student see an honorable path away from the law school. Sometimes it meant finding a law student who had wandered away and helping him back. Sometimes it meant finding the resources for a student who was about to fall away, or being the face of compassionate consequences when a student had taken a misstep. He never waited for students to come to him. He always went out and found them wherever they were. His networks of information were just incredible. Yes, students, he did know who you were dating. He knew who you broke up with last week, who you had your eye on, and who was talking to whom. And all of this was really possible because of the profound level of trust he inspired in everyone. And that trust was inspired by his deep integrity. In all those years, Len never lost track of any student, and he didn't forget any of them. I learned early on that when it came to humane judgments, he was always right. Always, always right. Many of our staff members called Len Yoda, the most powerful Jedi Master in the Star Wars universe, for his ability to see so clearly into the hearts and minds of others. My entire life at the law school, from the time I was a student all the way through the time I left, overlapped with Len's. And from my end, our professional partnership was just pure joy. I think about him every day, and every one of my better instincts come from what he taught about compassion, judgment, spiritual grounding, and presence. During the last months of his life, we'd email or talk on the phone or visit. Sometimes I'd sit outside the house and talk on the phone. And he told me every single time how grateful he was for his time with you, Donna, the love of his life, and how proud he was of you, Eric, and you, Callan. In one of those emails, I was in Australia looking out over the ocean. I was looking out over the waves, but my thoughts were in Bloomington, and they were with Len and with Donna. And his email back to me was a gentle and typical reminder to put my attention on what was in front of me. So I want to leave you with his voice. He wrote, "We are all riding the wave of perceptual eternity. So enjoy every eternal moment where you are. The prayers are indeed palpable. I am truly fine. Love, Len." Thank you.
I was asked to capture Len Fromm in 5 minutes or less. And I was thinking about that was less than the time that it takes to play a single hole of golf, even a par 3 hole, but I'll see what I can do. I knew Len for 30 years, and for most of that time, he was my closest friend. We played golf together, we took trips together, we talked together, we drank beer together, and we smoked cigars together. Len had an almost uncanny, calming influence on me, on the golf course and elsewhere. He was a stress reliever by his very presence, and that was even apart from the beer. Before he got sick, Len was everything a friend should be: compassionate, caring, always thinking about me more than himself. If I needed advice or counsel, Len was there. But I will also remember Len, as I think Lauren's comments suggested as well, for the time after he got sick. In fact, during those last few months of his life, we talked at a deeper level and became even closer friends. And during this final period of his life, Len was truly inspirational. As he faced his illness, Len was relentlessly positive. He had hope to the end, but it was a hope informed by realism. He lived one day at a time, and he prepared himself, rationally and spiritually, for whatever might come. His thoughtfulness, his grace, and his strength of character were simply incredible. Remarkably, even as his struggle continued, Len kept his focus on others. He would always ask about me and my family. He even counseled the staff at the Simon Center. My wife Debbie and I commented more than once, he's counseling the nurse and telling her, he's complimenting her, and he's suggesting how she might further fulfill her career as a health professional. Even more remarkably, as he thought forward to the possibility of a memorial service such as this, Len suggested to Donna that the focus should not simply be on him, not even at his own memorial service. He thought we should also note the passing of others who had gone before. And he specifically mentioned 2 other law school giants who had meant a lot to him, Harry Prater and Pat Bode. Len was thinking about others to the very end. One of Len's important contributions to the law school was his work on professionalism. Working with Bill Henderson and other colleagues, Len developed a list of 6 professional competencies that the law school should teach and that law students should strive to develop. In a fitting tribute to Len, we call them the Fromm 6. But when I recently took a look at the list, I realized that these were the Fromm 6 in more ways than one. Len not only developed this list of virtues, he also exemplified them. Listen to this list of virtues, the Fromm 6, and think about Len. Self-awareness, having a highly developed sense of self. Active listening, the ability to understand others by carefully noting their spoken words as well as their nonverbal cues. Questioning, knowing when and how to ask questions. Communicating, presenting your arguments and views persuasively, but at the same time, respectfully. Empathy, sensing and understanding what others are feeling. Do you know anyone who was more empathetic than Len? And how about the final virtue? Resilience, the ability to deal with difficult situations calmly and to maintain an optimistic and positive outlook. Len embodied all of these virtues and more. He was resilient to the end. He was not only empathetic, but also humble and compassionate, thinking about others far more than himself. So perhaps we should replace the Fromm 6 with a simpler message. Be like Len. Or, more realistically, try to be more like Len. That would be good advice, I think, not only for lawyers, but for anyone who wishes to live a meaningful and fulfilling life. When Len and I enjoyed a particularly good time together, whether playing golf on a beautiful day like today, or enjoying cigars in an open-air bar, in a little bar called Conky Joe's near Port St. Lucie, Florida, he sometimes would say that the experience was magical. But I've come to think that it was Len who provided the magic. He was a great man and a very special human being. Having him as my friend was a privilege, but it was more than that. It was a gift and a blessing, and the blessing continues with memories I will treasure for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Can these get any higher? I'm going to lean if everybody doesn't care. It's funny, I speak in front of cameras and I play in front of tens of thousands of people all the time, but speaking like this is kind of scary, so bear with me. Our family would like to thank Dean Bucksbaum, Provost Robel, and Dan Conkle for their kind words regarding my father and the impact he had on students, student life, and the university community at large. His caring nature, sensibility, and wisdom were characteristics we, Callan and I, as his children, benefited from as well. My dad loved the career he carved out at Indiana University, specifically, of course, the law school. As many of you know, he considered his work here as a great blessing which was bestowed on him by the powers that be, but also through the willingness that Dean Plager and the faculty had way back in 1979 to take a chance on him. My mother told us upon his hire, he immediately went to see Breaking Away and totally embraced Bloomington, the law school, and his role within. Essentially, he was thrilled to secure his dream position. Our thanks to all the alumni, faculty, and staff who loved and valued him as a dean for students and also a person. The person we knew and loved for his humanity, a person greatly missed in both body and spirit, but whose legacy lives on through all the students whom he touched. We wish the Maurer School of Law continued success. Our best wishes and thanks to you all for coming today to honor our father, Len Fromm. Thank you.
Hopefully, among the multifaceted reasons that you all have chosen to come to our law school is way beyond a question of ranking, even beyond a question of whether you got a scholarship or not, even though I know that's a significant calculus for many of you. But I hope you decided to come to our law school because you sensed that maybe there was something special here. I think there's something special here. The faculty think there's something special here. And it's hard to describe in a couple of words. But I'm going to make an attempt to at least sound some of the music that goes around in our building. let me say that I've had the privilege of standing up here in front of 30 entering classes. So I've been here more than a year or two. And I continue to feel that it is an amazing privilege to be able to be here. It's an amazing privilege to be able to have some impact, at least, or try to have some impact on the creation of a certain community here.
Mario Borelli. Krista Lee Duncan. C. Anthony Ashford. Andrea Lynn Graham. Angela Elbert Dietz. Richard Dietz. David Michael Pantos. Sarah Marie Fisher.
Good afternoon. I'll be the first and welcome many more, I'm sure, to make a public comment on a day that I've been waiting for with some thoughts for quite a while. I'm not a religious man. I'm not a superstitious man, but for Lynn Fromm, I may be making an exception in both categories, a little bit of both. I was going to say in my original notes that I may be the only person in this room, and I was reminded as Lauren was here that she's at least one other person that, looking out on the room, there are plenty of us that knew Lynn, leaned on Lynn, saw Lynn as a friend, saw Lynn as a therapist, saw Lynn as an advisor, as a student. Certainly many of us in the room, some of the same people that knew Lynn as a therapist and an advisor and a friend as a professional. And then, of course, those of us in the room that know Lynn as a colleague and a friend and a counselor on the faculty. I thought maybe I was the only one, but I'm forgetting at least Lauren, and I'm sure I'll be corrected before the day is over. I'm Mark Need. I'm a professor at the Maurer School of Law, and I knew Lynn certainly in all three capacities, but mostly as a friend and a counselor. I actually started a list of stories for Lynn long before we knew that, had any idea that a day like this might come along. It was for an entirely different reason. And the reason that I put that list away and didn't get to use it is a story about Lynn in and of itself, which is, I guess, maybe almost 5 years ago, I was surfing for something online and I came across the Indiana University website that had the anniversaries of employment for employees across the university, probably across all 8 campuses. And there right in the middle it said Leonard D. Fromm, 30 years. sort of unceremonious, right in the middle, buried on this webpage. And I stopped by Provost Robel, then Dean Robel's office, and I said, this can't be right, but it says that Lynn's been working with us for 30 years. And of course, her reaction was, that can't be right. We thought about it. I said, we need to do something, and she said, let me look into it. And the next time I saw her and we brought it up, I'm paraphrasing a bit, but Lauren said to me, you know what, you were right. It has been 30 years that Lynn's been with us. And I said, great. I said, what are we going to do for him? And she said, we're going to keep it to ourselves. We're not going to say a thing about it. It was part of a conspiracy to keep Lynn with us past 30 years. Because Lauren said, if we remind him, he'll realize how long it's been and he'll go, and we don't want him to go. So we didn't do anything in that regard. I looked down that list and, 20 or 30 stories, and I think to myself, probably 10 of which I can't tell in mixed company. And there are a lot of stories in this room, so I won't bore everyone, but, a couple of highlights that I think about frequently. My former partner, Dan Emerson, when we discovered that the third-year class one year had the exact same motto for raising money out of the third-year class that the Indianapolis Colts, a nearly billion-dollar business, had for their motto that year. The third-year class was worried, and Lynn Fromm didn't skip a beat. He came to me and asked me to send a cease and desist letter to Dan Emerson at the Indianapolis Colts. I didn't know if he was serious or not, so I drafted the cease and desist letter, and he made me read it to him out loud twice in his office. He had that great laugh where he threw his head back, and opened his mouth wide and laughed at the whole thing. And we sent the letter, too. I remember when I was at Bose McKinney and Evans, and my friend Bob Cassing's out here, and I've lost him now, but we had a bit of a retirement party at our holiday party for Bob after 28 years of managing partner at Bose McKinney. And right in the middle of the party, as though I had imagined this, the elevator doors opened, and D-Doll had spirited Lynn Fromm up to Indianapolis and into the party to congratulate Bob on finishing 28 years as managing partner. And all I could think, with all due respect to Bob, who's been a great friend and a mentor to me, was, what do you have to do right in your career to have Lynn Fromm appear out of the elevator and congratulate you at your retirement? And lastly, I had the pleasure of being on the Petitions and Appeals Committee a couple of semesters. And talk about institutional knowledge. Dean Fromm had seen everything in his 30-plus years. Dan Conkle's over here nodding his head because he was on that committee, I think, both semesters that I served with him. For those of you that don't know, the Petitions and Appeals Committee is the committee where there's not really a rule in the faculty handbook and there's not really a rule in the student handbook, but the student needs to do something special for unusual circumstances. And these petitions would come in, and they would be what I thought to be the most unique, strange sets of circumstances I'd ever seen. You'd have the student that wanted to pursue a master's in German constitutional theory in Chicago and had their left arm removed and replaced with their right arm and needed to live with their mother-in-law in Chicago. And we'd go through the petition, and I would think, this is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. Lynn was on that committee. He was a non-voting member of that committee, and Dan had been on that committee a number of times. And Lynn would turn to Dan and say, Dan, we saw something like this back in 1993, I think. And I don't know if Dan remembered or not, but he'd always nod his head and say, of course we did. And Lynn would remember exactly. He'd say, but it was his left arm that was removed, not his right arm. And I think he was living with his father-in-law, not his mother-in-law. And then he would remind everyone on the committee, I'm not a voting member of the committee, but here's what we did. And he would say it either ended terribly or it went fantastic. But you all do whatever you think is the right thing to do. And then he'd leave the room and let us pretend like we were all going to do what we were going to do. But we'd all say, we're going to do what he said, right? What he did. And we'd do it. And he made everything okay. So I'll close with this. Certainly a shepherd to me, a counselor to me. In 1987, I was a guy with a degree in physics trying to decide how to couple that with anything other than medical school. And somebody said, go over to the law school and see this guy, Lynn Fromm, the dean for student affairs. He runs their JD MBA program, and he'll tell you about the JD MBA program. And I came over to that humble office, as Lauren put it, in the basement of the law school, and I knocked on the door, and probably almost everyone in this room knows what I'm talking about when I say I sat in those crummy little chairs over in the corner and waited, and the door opened, and I went in, and I was troubled, and he made everything all right. And throughout law school, I knocked on that door, and I sat in those crummy little chairs, and I waited, and I went in, and he made everything all right. And I practiced for 15 years, and several occasions during my practice, I would be wrestling with something. I wouldn't know who could help me with it, and I came down and saw Len, and I knocked on that door, and I sat in those same, literally same crummy little chairs, and he let me in, and he made everything all right. And in 2006, I was privileged to join the faculty, and when I had that problem that I didn't know who could solve, difficulty with a student or whatever it was, of course, I found myself over there. I'd knock on that door, wait in those same crummy little chairs. He'd open the door and I would come in and he'd make everything all right. So I said when I started this, I'm not a superstitious person, I'm not a religious person, but I'll share both of these things with you. One is, I see Paul Leopold smiling back there. I've already apologized to him several times because I have a new superstition. Because I walk through those halls and still, as so many of us do, probably twice, 3 times a week, I think, oh, I need to ask Len about, I can't ask Len about it. So I've taken a knocking on that door anyway. That's Paul's office now. I just told him to ignore the knocks when he hears me go by. I can't walk by that door without knocking on it and hoping that it's going to make everything all right. That's my superstition. If you want to get my religion, Dan, you said, what is it, be like Len or be more like Len? I hacked a bracelet that's a little modification of what the kids were doing about 15 years ago. If you'd like me to break a bracelet for you, I call on all of you to join my own little personal religion here. My bracelet says WWLD. When I have a problem and I'm angry that he's not there to help me, I just ask myself with those students and otherwise, and you can all ask yourself, what would Len do? Remind yourself. Happy to make one for you. I know there are literally thousands of experiences, a lot of them in this room that are similar, so thank you for giving me 5 minutes to tell you about mine. Welcome.
My name's Arthur Lopez. I'm in the class of 83, and I see half the audience here is in the class of 83. Awesome group, awesome group. It's amazing. I saw Mrs. Fromm today, and I said, I know you so well, and she said, I know you so well too, and this is the first time we've really said more than 5 words to each other. And that's the way Len was. I found out not only did I lose a friend like so many of 30 years, you know, there was nothing I could do, whether I was accepted for a job, lost a job, got fired, we had a baby, whatever. Len was the second to know, and always wanted to know all the details. And so this is the first year I've practiced law without having my senior partner there, and it's been hard. What I did learn after he passed, though, was that I belonged to a club, and I never knew it. I belonged to the Len Fromm Club, and that I found that there are so many, I thought that it was just me. And then I talked to somebody else, and you just heard, everybody, good thing he wasn't a polygamist, you know? He had relationships with thousands of people who all thought that when he stopped in the hallway, those big shoulders, put his head down, and listened, and made sure that even though he's rushing somewhere, that he was listening just to you. I thought it was just me. And what I also found was that all those other people who he loved are all in concert, and that I was just talking to somebody earlier, all I need to know is that Len cared about you, and that's all I'll ever need to know. What would you like? What can I do? Because that's the spirit he brought to the school. As you know, Len had a plan for everybody, and he had a plan for me, and he would always tell me, no, don't apply for this committee. No, I want you to, no, I'd like you to do that. Okay. Why are you here? Len told me to. But also because Len always said, no, they're ready for you now. I go, you're ready for me now? Yeah, because, you know, I've always done civil rights from the time I was in, and Lauren, you know, you've always been very supportive. And so I know I'm going to bring this up, and please take this in the best of light, but this is, I mean, understand, Len was colorblind. he helped everybody. But there was a group of people. When I was at school, we had the largest, thanks to Frank Motley, we had the largest group of minorities in our school at that time. Those 7 years during that time, we had the largest group. And because of that, there was some issues. Because although Frank got us here, you all didn't know what to do with us when we got here. So we would get things in individually. We would be told things like, right before I'm ready to take a test, I know how you got here. Yeah, what do you mean? You got here on that affirmative action program. What he didn't understand was, yeah, I did. So what? Yeah, and I'm proud, and I made it. But that wasn't the time. So you would get those kind of things, and you'd go down to Len and tell him about it, and he'd say, someday you'll prove them wrong. And don't worry, buckle up. And like you said, everything was okay. There was another time that a professor, who we all love, unfortunately liked to use the N-word a lot in the classroom. And Len got lots of complaints. And he told us all, it's okay. You're going to be okay. We're going to handle this. And he did, not immediately, but he worked it out, and there was a change. We can ignore that those things happened, but the fact is that's what makes our school strong, is because they did happen, and we had such a man to make it work, to make it better, and to make, I owe my career to him, as so many do. I served a president. I've done so many things that I had no reason to believe I could ever do. There was one other time when we used to, just because there were so many of us, I don't know why, but we were comfortable. And the school was pretty beat down at the time. If you remember, the tiles would fall down the middle of property class. Truly, we'd have to move, and they would just keep talking. And so we would go on, but we used to meet in the morning. By we, I mean many of the minorities, say, hi, how are you? We all get together. And a complaint was brought to Len's attention that those minorities were loitering. They were okay individually, but they were getting in a group, and you couldn't deal with them in that group. They were unapproachable. And he was to ask us to move and stop meeting together in more than groups of 2 or 3, because we're intimidating the population by saying hello. So I sat down, and he told me about it, and I said, so what should we do? And he said, they'll get over it. I miss him like you all do. I don't know every day what to do. I know that whenever I have a decision to make, the first thing I do is think about him. And I know that I speak truly for so many minorities who would not have been in this school without him. One last story I found when a certain professor came to me and said after a class, you know, quote, you don't belong here. You should leave. I thought it was just me. I talked to Len. He didn't know at the time. We later found out that the first Latino graduate in 1966 was given the same lecture by the same professor in the same words. Len would say he would get over it. So, thank you.
I'm Alfonso Mans. I'm commonly called Al Mans. I'm a graduate in 1972. I met Len when he came to Indiana University shortly after that, 1970. And Len and I would talk at student affairs and functions. And also, I would see him at the YMCA. He would come there regularly and to exercise, and I would also. Oh, thank you very much. That saved me from bending over, huh, Eric? I sympathize with you. And I've watched Eric over the years play basketball. I'd love to see him play. I thought, when I came in, I saw Len's picture up there on the walls, and I said to myself, I know some things about Len that perhaps someone here may not know about and may want to share with you. Len, I'm a trial lawyer, and I've only had 2 occasions where a lawyer was called to serve on a jury. And The one case was a local case. A very prominent lawyer was called, and he got to serve as an alternate juror. But Lynn got the chance to be called as a juror in the federal court. I don't mention the judge's name, but I said to myself when I walked in the courtroom and saw the jury come in, oh, that's someone I know on the jury, a member of the faculty at Indiana University Law School. And I said to myself, after what I went through in law school with the Socratic method, I'm going to have some fun doing voir dire. Well, unfortunately, the judge right off excused Lynn from serving on the jury. I said, doggone it. Anyway, it was to be fun. It wasn't going to be something that would be terrible. I was going to have some fun with Lynn at that occasion. Anyway, I asked Lynn after that trial, why was he excused from the jury just like that? Because apparently he and the judge knew something that I didn't know, because the judge didn't explain himself. Well, apparently the judge and Lynn had some disagreement about the law in the case in which we were trying the case. And that's why they... Now, the thing was that I won the case. So, and he had one of his students sitting with the opposing side. Lynn came to me and asked me, would you like to talk to my class about this case? And I declined, because I thought it was unfair in a way to share what was going on. I miss Lynn. I knew him as a casual friend, but he never felt himself afar. And I appreciated one of the things that he told me once, and I can remember the rest of my life. In one of these student functions, I would come in and he would ask me to speak, and I would speak as an alumnus. And I told him about an experience I had which raised an ethical question. And it was a very serious ethical question. I mean, it involves quite a bit of money. It'll cause some other kinds of problems, and I shared that experience with the students. And after that meeting, he came to me and said, Al, I really appreciate you doing that. He called upon the alumni to help with the teaching of the students at the school, which is so important. And I want to thank your family for the opportunity to have met him and got to know him. I loved it as you did. Thank you.
There are an awful lot of you. My goodness. Well, you'll have to forgive me. I'm terrible at public speaking, but well, I'm Callan Fromm. Len was my dad, and I mean, you all, your students, you know what I'm talking about when I say that Dad, he helped. He didn't just give meaningless platitudes or it'll be okay, it'll be okay. He actually gave constructive criticism. One of the things I always appreciated about Dad was he saw me for who I was, not for who I was expected to be as a young woman in 1990s, 2000s. I was interested in the sciences, so he encouraged me. I was interested in space, in bugs, in engineering and robots, how they built buildings and bridges, why things worked the way they did, why laws went the way they did, why people do what they do, and he indulged me. He taught me, and he always worked with me on those things. I wasn't very good at people. Social things are awkward, and he kind of showed me the ropes. He taught me how to take a step back and active listening, communication, that sort of thing. Pay attention to not only what the person is saying, but how they say it, their bodily cues, everything. Because all of that says so much, and when you're able to read that, it's much less scary to deal with people, and Dad taught me that. Dad taught me to be patient and think before I speak, which I admit I'm not doing a very good job of following that right now, no notes. But Dad taught me a lot, and I'm still learning because I'm learning now that he was so very patient and generous with people when I'm generally not very patient with people. I may have to learn that as a teacher, but I'm hoping that as a school teacher, I'll be able to take a lot of what Dad did for me, made me feel comfortable in my own skin, made me feel competent and able and right as being who I am, as being this scientist, this thinker, this mover and changer, I hope. Feeling comfortable being that rather than feeling uncomfortable, you know. I don't do, you know, what is it, Justin Bieber the kids are doing these days? I don't know. I don't watch the television shows or any of that, and I feel okay doing that. I don't have to be like everybody else, and I'm comfortable with that because Dad showed me that in the end it doesn't matter. We all grow up, and in the end it's my personal skills that are gonna get me forward in life. And you know, I'm really glad that he was able to help a lot of you too, because I feel like it's great that he was able to share all of that, not just with me and Eric, and to give us everything, but to be able to share so much of that with you guys. So if I can even help 1/8 of the people, 1/16 of the people that Dad helped, I'll consider myself a successful teacher.
My name is Jay Plager. I'm one of the anonymous deans for whom Len Fromm represented us over the years. I had the privilege of being the very first dean that Len worked with. In fact, I found him and hired him, but it wasn't just that alone. A couple of the speakers mentioned an aspect of Len's contribution that goes beyond the personal. We've heard a lot about his personal qualities and his personal abilities, but there's an aspect of his role that I want to mention, which is the institutional contribution that he made to our law school. When I came as dean in the late 70s, it was clear to me and to a large group of the faculty, which had previously been led by Harry Prater and Doug Boshkoff, that if we were going to build the institution that we all wanted for IU Law School, it needed two important things. One of them was recruiting a broad-based student body. And for that, we were fortunate. We found Frank Motley, who is still with us and doing that good job. But we also recognized that once we brought the students here, we needed someone who could work with the students regardless of their background, regardless of any of their race, color, creed, or any of these other factors. We were looking for the best students from whatever background, and Frank was terrific in broadening that base, and we needed someone like Len Fromm, who over the years, even though Len the Dean of Students might not be of the same generation as the incoming students, it would be a person who the students could identify with, and who the dean could identify with. We were enormously blessed by actually finding just the person, that Len Fromm, who we were looking for. And he turned out to be everything that any dean could possibly want. And I think every dean who has served the law school since my time back in the 70s and early 80s, and there have been a few, have been the beneficiaries right up, and I'm sure Hannah would echo that sentiment. We in the institution and the faculty have been blessed to have had Len work for us over all these years. My one wish from my perspective at this point for the future of our law school is that Hannah and the faculty of this generation have the same good luck that we had back in that generation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Karras-Naboyski. I was the class of 2000, and I was the one mewling like a small cat up here in the front, so you'll have to excuse me. I'm still a bit verklempt. Seeing these great pictures of Len and just really feeling his presence and hearing his voice was, for me today, like an amazing thing. And to Donna, Callan, and Eric, I had the chance to talk with you earlier. I have to apologize, which is I haven't even been able to bring myself to write to you because I can't even deal with the fact that Len isn't with us anymore. So I think I'll be able to convey things a lot better after I talk to you today. For those of you who probably don't know about me, I came to IU Law 22 years old, very naive and sheltered, and having had the best senior year of my entire life in college. And I came with a full raging case of mono and leaving my parents and my sister, my very close family, for the first time in my life. And I was a disaster. The night before law school started, I'm sure many of you came to this same event. They had a kind of a meet and greet, and Dean Fromm did some speaking about the school for out-of-state students. I met two very important people that night in my life, one of which was Dean Fromm, and the other one was my future husband. But their perceptions of me were very, very different from the outset. I came in late, which I'm Greek, it's not my fault, it just happens. But there's also more to that, which is what nobody knew is why I was late. My husband saw me because I had to crawl over every other student there because the only spot left in the entire place was in the middle of a row. And it was going to be a long meeting, so I crawled over these people, and my husband later admitted to me that his thought is look at that stupid little girl, sorority girl from some college, can't even get here on time. Well, Len's response was he must have seen my tear-stained face because I had been hanging on to my parents outside of the law school and wouldn't let them leave. So Len must have seen that because he sees everything. He saw everything, and I'm sure at first he thought he probably tagged me as one of those people, oh, you better keep an eye on this one. So in addition to having mono and being completely out of my element and convinced I was going to die in the cornfields of Bloomington, I figured, well, I had to do something to make myself feel better. So of course, I joined Student Law Association, and that's really how I first got to meet Len. And then over the years, I became president of the student government and did moot court and a slew of other things. And eventually, Len, after graduation, had me serve on the alumni board. And I was so privileged to serve as president recently, all because of Len, of course. But during that time, and especially during my third year of law school, was it Dean Robel was talking about, Dean Robel, see, old habits die hard, Provost Robel, was mentioning about his spies. I think that was, or Dean Bucksbaum, one of the two of you mentioned his spies. I admit I was one of his spies. And we had a give and take. I'd come in, we had our pre-assigned time. It was usually after everyone I was out of the law school and be like, so what's going on? And I was like, you go first. And he would throw back his head and laugh in that wonderful way that I absolutely adored. And we were really kindred spirits. I think Len really discovered over the course of, I'm young, I'm been out of law school for 13 years now, but I think at the very first, we just clicked and we're really kindred spirits. And I love people, and I love our IU Law community. And I think that he saw that in me and just did everything he could to see that blossom and develop. And he was definitely like a matchmaker with my husband. He always kept a temperature on the pulse. So how's things with you and David? Oh, okay, things like that. And then I will never forget, and you guys will appreciate this, we were sitting in his office one day as he was trying to ply me for more information about who knows what, one of the many goings-ons. And I said to him, you know what, this facade, I don't buy it anymore. I said, I don't buy it. I know what's going on here. You are a master psychologist, and what you're trying to do is, I bet that you have a dossier on every single student who has ever passed through this office, and that you have those stored up somewhere, and you're writing a huge paper about the psychosis of law students. And he threw back his head and laughed so hard, and he goes, that's what you think is going on here? I'm like, yeah, I do. He's like, that's funny. He never denied it. Never denied it. So, when those are found, and I swear to you, they're in the bowels of the law school. I'm sure that there are catacombs down there. When they're mine. They're mine, I will share, but they're mine, because I know they're there. Because really, that's what he was. He was his listening and his counseling, how is it that one human being was such a kindred spirit and truly got into the hearts of so many people? I mean, we're just a fraction of them. He was really a dad to me. I really needed one, especially when I came to Bloomington. And we understood each other. And he would send me hilarious emails. And oftentimes, I now have 2 boys of my own who are 5 and 4 and almost 7. And he would write me, I would send him pictures, and he knew about what was going on with my boys. And I just thought I would share, because Callan and Eric, I know we haven't met, but I feel like I've kind of grew up with you guys. I used to hear stories about you, and Callan, I know he always loved telling me, he was always so excited to kind of see what you were going to do next, because you had so many interests, and it was a wonderful thing. No, it really was. He was thrilled, and in fact, he sent me an email once. He was so excited that, because you had just started at law school, and he said, my daughter starts at IU this fall, living 2 blocks from my office, so I have a place to escape to when I get crazy. I thought, Len gets crazy, but I suppose he does. He followed that by a smiley face, of course. But then I sent a picture once of my son who was a year old and had fallen and gotten stitches, and I felt like a degenerate mother, and I told him, I think DCFS is going to come to my house, and my usual drama rampage. And he wrote and said, thanks for the note, which brings back a lot of memories of my son, who had his habit of wanting to spin on the sidewalk, lifting his body into the air, and then falling flat on his chin. I think we have had 3 trips to the ER to suture his jawline for a total of about 20 stitches, most of which are now invisible on his long face and 6'8" frame. This weekend, he tried the same old trick on his way to dunk and found himself flat on the floor after getting bulldozed, but luckily no injury. AAU basketball every weekend from Cincy to Detroit to Louisville to Chicago to Vegas and who knows where else. I will need stitches in my brain pretty soon, but all for the fun of it. So he shared things like that. I really, felt his presence in everything. And I have to apologize to him in one respect. I know he's out there and listening. One of the most awe-inspiring and flattering, I don't even know how to describe it, one of the most incredible gifts that he had ever given to me. And I don't really can't even believe that this actually happened this way, but he had been talking about it threatening retirement for several years before he actually did. And he would send me these emails about, the dean position, this dean position is open, this one is open, this one is open. And then he happened to come to Chicago for lunch one day, and he was up doing something, and we had lunch. And he looked at me frankly, and he said, don't you understand? He's like, I don't know how else I'm going to do this, but I'm just going to have to tell you. I would like you to come into my office when I retire. And to me, that was like the hugest honor that he could ever have given me, because no one could step in that office as far as I was concerned. And the fact that he thought that maybe I could even pick up a little bit of where he left off, it just stunned me. I didn't even know what to say. So to Len, I'm sorry I disappointed you. Unfortunately, I do have my parents and my sister and my family back home. But my heart is always here in Bloomington, and this is my home, and no visit to Bloomington was ever complete without running up to Dean Fromm and getting a big, huge hug and hearing him laugh and just feeling like I was home. Feeling like I was home. He was a dad to me, and truly one of the best mentors that I've ever had in my life, and I ever will have. So thank you very much. And Len, as he always used to say to me in his emails, all my bestest. And all my bestest to you, Len. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Dominic Glover. I graduated from our law school in the spring of 1997, and I am here for the simple reason that Dean Fromm changed my life. I grew up not far from here. I was born in Bloomington, Indiana, and it was my lifelong dream, to go to law school here. And I arrived in the fall of 1993, and it was not a good fit for me at that time. There were a lot of difficulties, and I ended up withdrawing from law school. I think it was sometime halfway through the first semester, and it was a very difficult decision for me, and I think that Dean Fromm was acutely aware that this was a lifelong thing that I had wanted to do. And before I did that, we sat down in that small office on the lower level, and he asked me if this was if I was certain that this is what I wanted to do. And I said to him that I couldn't go forward. And so I ended up withdrawing. And in February of the following year, Dean Fromm called me. And I was stunned that he called me. And he asked me to come see him. So I came to see Dean Fromm, and he asked me if I was ready to go to law school. And I was. And I asked him, because it was difficult for me to be admitted to the law school, frankly. And I asked him, I said, I don't know that I would be readmitted again. And he said, well, Dom, your admission was simply deferred. It was not a situation where you would have to reapply. Your admission was deferred for a year. So we would like for you to please come back. And that has made all of the difference in my life. And that was a long time ago. And there's not a week that goes by that I don't think about that. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And I want to thank all of you.
Well, I never met a microphone I didn't like. Two quick stories about Len. My name is Peter McCabe. I'm the class of '85. So it's second semester, third year. I decided to take a class outside the law school, in the business school. And you could do that. You could get 3 credits outside the law school. And so I decided to take accounting. Wouldn't that be great? I knew I was going to be a commercial trial lawyer. I would have accounting. That would really help me. Okay, I'd taken accounting in college. I was going to be a superstar. I knew all this stuff. Okay, well, first the lecture goes by, and everything I knew about accounting was covered in that first class. And I said to myself, this might be a problem. So I got a D- and a quarter, and now I'm starting to panic because I'm thinking, I can't believe it. I did so well in law school, and now I'm going to get kicked out of this or not get my degree because I was, Mr. Smarty Pants and decided to take an accounting class. In any event, I studied really, really, really hard for the final, but I got a C-. In order to get the credit, you had to have a C. So who do I go to? But I go to Len Fromm. And I said, Len, we have a problem, because it was always we. It wasn't I, it was we. So he said, well, what's that, Pete? And I said, well, I got this C-,
in accounting, and I know you have to have a C. So can you just take your eraser kind of and take off that minus? And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. And so I was in the gymnasium, or not the gymnasium, the auditorium, and he was calling names across, and I'm thinking, boy, I sure hope he calls my name, because my parents are here and all that stuff. And they would not be happy if the diploma wasn't, and so then I'm thinking, okay, he's going to call my name, but there's going to be no diploma in the package. So in any event, he called my name, so that's good. And then I got over and I opened it up, and there it is, the parchment, sheepskin, whatever you want to call it. And so I said, Len is the best. And he's got a very good eraser. All right, the second and final story I want to say is as he was getting very, very sick, I had just been watching the IU Butler game, and Butler won. So I call him up, and he was on the phone. I called him on his cell because of course I had him on speed dial. Whenever I needed an eraser, I would always call him. So I hear him on the other phone, and he's either got his mother-in-law, or some good friend, and I say, oh, Len, don't worry, don't interrupt your call. He said, no, Pete, I'm going to call, take your call. So he takes my call, and I'm thinking, I'm really not that important, Len, so he takes my call. So then, of course, we get on the phone. I said, so who was this redheaded kid who led the Butler Bulldogs to victory? And he, did that great laugh, as everybody knows. And, of course, it was his son. And so in any event, we talked, and he's very sick at this point in time. We talked, and he, asked me about this and asked me about my girls. And he was so involved with everybody. Everybody in this room is here for a reason. And that is because Len touched all of us. I mean, all of us. And he must have had a spy system. Where is that young lady who, oh, there she is, yeah. Okay, you kind of look like a spy, actually. But he had spies everywhere. I think he even used me to get some information. But in any event, he was a true friend, a great family man, a very good accordion player, and we'll always remember him for as long, or I always will remember him for as long as I live, because he had the best eraser in the world. Thank you.